Welcome to Your Biz, Your Rules, the podcast for business-minded go-getters hosted by me, your favourite brain and biz coach, Daire Paddy. This is the spot for those of you ready to blend heart and head, woo and do, income and impact, change and chill, and so much more. So grab yourself a cuppa and let's get started. Now, today, I am going to be talking about the topic that I am most nervous about, the topic that I am most afraid of speaking about publicly. And this is something that I've sort of mentioned in passing before. I've hinted that there's something there, but I've never really explored it in all that too much detail. And today, that all changes. But like I mentioned, I'm a little bit nervous about this. I'm a little bit afraid of speaking to this, which is why I've got the power lippy on. It's an essential, as you know, when you need that extra jolt of confidence. So let's dive in, because even though I am afraid, there's something in my soul that is telling me that this needs to be shared. So back at the end of 2020, I signed up for this group coaching program. Now, when I signed up, I thought I was going to be getting this really sort of close-knit, small mastermind experience that would be really supporting me and helping me in creating financial freedom on my own terms. So what really appealed to me was this idea that we would be working together, like with the community and with the coach that was leading it to, design a totally me kind of business. And I was really looking forward to that. That is exactly what I needed in that moment. And so I said yes to this massive investment. And let me just be clear, it was a massive investment to me. The total cost of this program was 15K. I've never spent that much on anything unless you count buying a house. So it was a real stretch for me. And I didn't just have 15K lying in the bank. Like, full transparency, I got a loan to help me pay for it. And so it was through the bounce back loan scheme. And that didn't even cover like the full cost of the program. But I was so sure that this was the thing that was going to help me, that this is the thing that was going to allow me to grow in a way that felt right, felt values driven for me, that I was like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm committing, I'm diving in, I'm taking this leap, I'm going to do the thing. And unfortunately, it wasn't long after signing up that I realized that the image I'd been sold was not what I was getting access to. So I thought I was going to be getting this very small, close-knit community and this very bespoke way of working. And that's not what it was. So first of all, the community, yes, it did start at 20-ish people. And then a month later, there was another launch, and then another launch, and then another launch. And before long, there were maybe up to 100 people in that community, but we didn't get additional support from that coach. And there's a big difference between having 20 people on a coaching call versus having 75 people on a coaching call. Like, the level of attention that you can get is vastly, vastly different. And then in terms of the content itself, again, I thought I would be getting a very bespoke way of working and, the opportunity to get creative and mastermind and all of that good stuff. But that wasn't what I was getting. What I was getting was yet another rinse and repeat launch formula. And I had no interest in another rinse and repeat launch formula, because I've done courses like that in the past. I've done programs like that in the past. And ironically enough, I'd actually run launches for this coach in the past. So I knew the mechanics of how to do that. That's not what I was looking for. And so already I was dissatisfied. Like, a month in, I was dissatisfied. But I was like, do you know what? I am going to give this my best shot. I'm going to give this my best shot because, number one, I've invested this massive amount of money, this really uncomfortable amount of money. Number two, that contract is ironclad. Like, I am not getting out of that container. So I'm going to give it my best shot. And that is the mindset that I went in with. So I was like, I'm going to show up to every call that I can. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to follow all the advice. I'm going to try everything that is suggested to me. And so that is exactly what I did. And of the, I want to say 7 launches that I did while inside of that group for 1 year, so that's in 12 months, I made 3 sales in total in 1 year. And that to me is absolutely shocking. When the investment was that high and the so-called level of expertise that was being offered was that elevated, every single student, if they are showing up and doing the work, should be making more than 3 sales in 12 months. I mean, what the hell? And beyond just the sort of frustration at the lack of tangible results, the space itself did not feel good. It did not feel supportive. It did not feel nurturing. It did not feel personal. I cannot tell you the amount of harmful language I noticed from the people in charge inside of that space. The amount of trauma that was being triggered, not just triggered, but created, was disgraceful to me. And I felt trapped in that container, trapped for 12 months to endure what was going on in there. And it is one of the most destructive experiences that I've ever been part of. And I know that is a bold thing to say, and I know that is a harsh thing to say, but it is also true. And what's shocking is that it wasn't just true for me, or maybe it's not shocking. It wasn't just true for me. I found out much later on that a huge proportion of the people inside of that program felt exactly the same, but they thought it was just them. They thought they were alone. What you should not be doing is getting people through the door, giving them loads of love and attention while you're launching, then popping them in a Facebook group, giving them access to your evergreen courses, and buggering off to launch again and make more sales. If you are selling, especially a high ticket or high touch program that promises a certain amount of personal attention, that is what you should be providing. And I mentioned like the massive shift in numbers in that program. Well, like I said, if you have 20 people on a 90-minute coaching call, chances are a good chunk of them are going to be able to get some support during that call. But if you have 75 people on a call that is the same length, the percentages go way, way, way in the other direction. And so even if technically they are getting access to the same thing, that 1 call a month, they are not getting access to the level of support that was assumed. Another thing that I learned, scaling up without having the structures in place to support that is a recipe for disaster. We hear a lot about making offers scalable and scaling this and scaling that. And I think people often mean that scaling just means bringing more people in. And that's not what scaling is. Scaling, more than anything, is a question of structure. Because if your offers, if your experiences cannot sustain that many people through the door, then this is a house of cards that is very rapidly going to fall down. Because yes, you might experience this sort of upshot of loads of people jumping on the hype wagon and coming through the doors, but before long, they're going to look around and realize that this is not the kind of support that they should be getting. And they're going to remember this, and they're going to talk about this, and ultimately your offer that you poured so much love and time into is going to die. It is going to peter out. Nobody's going to want it going forward. It's going to have a much shorter shelf life than expected. So that is not scalability. Another lesson that I learned is to pay attention to the community that I have. Don't hard sell to people who are clearly struggling. So again, you've got to pay attention to the people that are already in the door. So one of the things I experienced in that group program is being a few months in and really not making any money, really struggling to cover my bills and all of that stuff. And the coach at the time was like, okay, I get it, I hear you. What you need to do is come to this event that I'm doing. And so she essentially sold a bunch of us into this live event that she was doing. And then the event was predominantly her pitching this same program that we were into. What the hell? Who is teaching that kind of strategy? It's tacky. It's gross. And that is never something that I'm going to do in my business. If somebody is already in your world, if somebody is already investing financially in you, stop trying to sell them into every other thing that you do. It's just tacky. Another lesson that I learned is that you can forge great friendships pretty much anywhere. So I've talked a lot about the toxic elements of that space, but actually I connected with some brilliant human beings there too. I connected with some people who became long-term clients for me. I connected with some people who became friends that I'll meet up with every now and again. I connected with some people who continue to support me online as that I do with them. So just because you've had maybe a less than ideal experience in a particular space, don't be tempted to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Sometimes the connections that you forge there will have greater long-term value to you. I know it can be very, very tempting when you've been hurt by a person or an experience to distance yourself from everything that is associated with that thing. And sometimes that's just not necessary. Sometimes there are elements that you can take with you. In my case, it was the friends. Another lesson that I learned is that I can trust when something is not for me. If I get that feeling, if I get that nudge that this is not for me, this way of working is not aligned with how I want to be showing up in the world, I get to trust that voice. And in the past, I didn't. In the past, I really didn't. In the past, I always thought that, I knew I was smart, but I thought that somebody else knew better. I always thought that there was somebody who was, more successful or more of an expert that could shed some light on something that I was missing. Now I know that my intuition is the smartest voice in the room. And if I am saying that something is not going to work for my business, then that is the truth, because actually nobody knows my business like I do. And that is the same for you too. Yes, put yourself in spaces where you'll be challenged, where you'll be stretched, where you'll be offered different perspectives, where you might be given advice that challenges you. But if your inner wisdom is saying, hard no, this is not for me, listen. And that is something that took me a while to learn. And I think it took me having this experience to realize that I can trust my intuition above anybody else in the world. No matter how smart, no matter how jazzy, no matter how successful, my intuition still knows better. And so does yours. Another lesson that I learned, and this is a biggie, not everyone is equipped to facilitate deep work. Even if they've done a certification, even if they've done training on the topic, that doesn't mean that they have the internal resources to hold space, to create healing. Those are gifts that not everybody is born with. And the reason that I say this is part of that program included this sort of energy healing thing each month. So we had one of these sessions each month that was more healing than coaching. And there were times when people would have to turn off their camera on Zoom to go and throw up mid-healing. Energy healing should not be having that impact on you physically. It simply should not. And if it is, then chances are the person that you are experiencing it with is not equipped to be doing that, has no business doing that kind of deep work with you, and has not created a safe container. Any spiritual work and any energetic work should be facilitated by an expert, not by somebody who wants to add it to their sales page to make their program sound extra magical or extra holistic. That's dangerous. That can cause long-lasting damage to the client. Another thing that I learned is that people they're just going to think what they think. People will always think what they think, and nothing you can do will change their mind. So no amount of me giving feedback to the coach or to the team impacted the way that they showed up, impacted the way that they marketed that program. Sometimes, yes, people are open to feedback, people want to hear your thoughts, but sometimes people don't, and you cannot convince them to change the way they're doing things. And the only person that is going to suffer if you try is you. So sometimes you've just got to know when to let things go, when to walk away. And that's hard for me to say, because I really do believe in standing up for what you believe in and using your voice for good and creating change wherever you can. But there are times, there are contexts where actually you're just going to be wasting your own time and energy. It's not going to do any good. Another lesson that I learned is that coaches really do have an amazing capacity. They have a capacity to support you, to hold space, to transform the way you think, but they also have a capacity to harm. They have a capacity to, like I said, not just trigger old trauma and old hurts, but create new ones. And that was definitely my experience inside of that group. So there was a part of me that really got triggered by only certain people getting attention and getting celebration and getting acknowledged in the group container. It definitely took me back to times at school where there were cliques and like groups of mean girls, and some people got all the attention and all the praise and then some people didn't, and it really took me back to the playground and like reactivated wounds and hurts and traumas that I thought I'd long let go of. And then there were also elements of this program that created brand new traumas for me to deal with, traumas that I am still dismantling now, traumas that I'm still working to release almost 2 years after I joined that container, which is wild. But that's the kind of impact that harmful coaches can have long term. And I think that is one of the reasons that so many people are getting kind of jaded about investing in support, coaches, healers, space holders, whatever. Because those hurts, they last. Another lesson that I learned is that you are the only one who has to feel comfortable with your price point. You are the one that has to feel comfortable with your price point. I cannot tell you how many times I was told that the only reason I wasn't getting what I wanted in my business is because I wasn't charging enough. Bullshit. People price things however the hell they want. You can get a lipstick for $1.99 and you can get a lipstick for over £100. People still buy both lipsticks. They're just marketed to different people, which means you can price however the hell you want, and you are the only person who has to believe in your price point. Your price point is not your coach's business. Your price point is not for anybody else to judge you on. It is yours. And the same is true of so many elements of your business. But for me, the pricing thing was a really significant point that kept coming up again and again over the course of those 12 months. Another lesson that I learned is that self-sabotage is the lazy coach's response to everything. It really, really is. Again, I cannot tell you how many times I tried to reach out to the coach I'd invested in, tried to reach out to the team and share what was going on and ask for advice, ask for support, only to be told, you're sabotaging yourself. And I remember that happening multiple times and that being a response that was posted to me in the Facebook group. You are sabotaging yourself, full stop. No elaboration, no context, no follow-up support to help me work through the supposed self-sabotage. It was just an offhand remark designed to dismiss me. A real coach, a qualified coach, they may reflect back a pattern of self-sabotage. They may ask you if you think that's something that you're experiencing. But what they will also do is they will stay with you in that moment and they will help you unpick it. They will help you figure out if and how you are sabotaging yourself and what to do to release that, to move on. That is what your coach should be doing. They should not be making offhand proclamations and then leaving the proverbial room. Another thing that I learned is that your success is not a numbers game. Like, that is something that I was also told. Like, every time I brought up one of my launches that didn't seem to be getting the sign-ups, every time I shared my results, it's a numbers game. Do some Facebook ads. That's not a catch-all business response. There are so many things, tiny things, technical things that can influence the tangible results you are receiving in your business. It's not all about how many people you're getting in front of. Again, that is a lazy coach's response. The next thing that I want to talk about, the next lesson that I learned, is that often these oh so cosmic, oh so divine feminine vibe coaches are actually deeply, deeply ruled by the patriarchy and patriarchal thinking and these old school sales structures and like toxic marketing techniques and all of that stuff that they portray themselves as being totally against. And you don't always see that up front, because when you look at somebody, when you see their marketing, when you maybe experience their launches, you see what they want you to see. And unfortunately, sometimes then when you get behind the paywall, when you actually work with them, you realize that, we're one step away from a pyramid scheme. And that's an unfortunate reality of a big portion of the coaching world. And again, I like to think that people do the best they can with what they have available to them. So people do the best they can with the training that they've taken in the past, with how they were taught to do business, with how they were taught to coach. And this is why I think it's so important to share stories like this and to be honest about what we've experienced, so that slowly but surely we can start affecting change, not just in our tiny little communities, but on an industry level scale. Because there are harmful behaviors that I have seen again and again coming from these fluffy, quote unquote, divine feminine coaches. And it's toxic. Another lesson that I learned, and this is a big one for me. And do you know what? I don't know if I even could say that I learned it during that experience, but I would say that it's something I was reminded of. My clients will never, ever have to earn my attention. If somebody joins one of my group programs or works with me one-on-one, they don't get more attention when they start getting amazing wins and hitting vanity metrics that I can use to sell my services. The way they earn my attention is by signing up to work with me. And once they're in, they're in. I am fully invested in working with that person side by side. And I cannot tell you the amount of, not just this program that I'm talking about today, but the amount of different containers that I've been in where if you hit a certain income milestone, or if you have a particular win that looks good on the surface, that coach will give you so much more attention and so much more TLC because they see ding, 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 case study in their future. Whereas the people who are having smaller wins or quieter achievements or nothing at all do not get the same level of attention. And that is something that I will never allow to take place when I work with people. That's for damn sure. Another thing that I learned is when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And this is totally stolen from the genius mind of Maya Angelou. She has a very famous quote that says something along those lines. But if people behave in a certain way consistently, and they say the same harmful things consistently, stop making excuses for them. Believe that that's who they are. And act accordingly. Whether that means challenging them or walking away altogether. Another lesson that I learned, I'm sorry, I have a lot of these lessons. I really have challenged myself to think of all of the positive things that I could take away from this experience because it was so destructive in so many ways. And I really would encourage you to do that. If you ever go through something that felt really negative, felt really harmful, try to sit with it and see all of the positives, all of the silver linings, all of the things that you can actually take away from that whole experience. Another thing that I learned is that I will never again try to force myself into someone else's system. And this is something that I've talked quite extensively about recently, both with friends and on a couple of podcasts that I've been interviewed on. But I will no longer try and shoehorn myself into somebody else's formula. Now, don't get me wrong, if there is something that I want to learn or I want to master, I will take a course, I will take a training, and I will follow those lessons. I will try it out, I will experiment. But if it doesn't work for me, I'm not going to keep forcing myself to do that thing. I'm going to take what fits and discard the rest. Because formulas, frameworks, they are not designed to work for everybody. And I firmly believe that every single thing, every single system out there can work, but that's not to say that it necessarily does work all the time. And we have to be aware of that. And again, it's not a you problem. Like if you have followed somebody's system, if you have followed, I don't know, their launch framework or their marketing blueprint or whatever, and it just does not yield the results, that just means that it's not the one for you. It's not the way for you to work. It doesn't mean that you are stupid or you are doing it wrong or you are sabotaging yourself or you are not qualified. It doesn't have to mean anything about you. It's just a thing that you've tried that is not the way. That's all. Another thing that I learned is, I suppose I've already spoken about this one, but don't always assume that it's a you problem. And again, personal responsibility, yes. If we sign up for something, it is down to us to make sure we show up for calls and work through the trainings and implement the lessons and sit with the discomfort and face those challenging truths and conversations with ourselves and do all of that stuff. But it is also the responsibility of the coach or teacher you've invested in to support you through that, to be there, to co-create a new solution with you if the formula doesn't work. It's not always a you problem. Sometimes things just need tweaking. Another lesson that I've learned is that changing your mind is okay. Changing your mind is okay. And I'm speaking as a coach who creates containers here. So someone who creates different types of programs, one-on-one and group. Sometimes we have an idea and we think, this is it, this is the idea, this is amazing. So we start promoting that idea, we launch that idea, we start making sales based on that idea. And then maybe we get, a little way into the timeline and we're like, there's something missing here. I want to reformat this, or I want to add this in, or I want to take this away. And we are allowed to do that. We are allowed to do that. These are our businesses. We get to make our own rules. We get to change our mind. And if you have sold something to somebody and they are under a very specific set of assumptions about what that thing is, and then you pivot massively and they don't want that thing, let them go. Do not tie people in. Do not hold people hostage if you have sold them one thing and turned it into something else. Yes, you get to change your mind, but other people are allowed to not change their mind. So if they're looking for something specific and have invested in something specific and thought that's what they were getting with you, if you change the game, let them leave. Because it is not going to yield good results for you. It is not going to yield good results for them. Yes, you'll get, the rest of their monthly payments or whatever, but then it's done. And then that relationship with that person is forever damaged. They will never forget that. They will never forgive you. They will never invest in working with you ever again. Whereas if you let them out, that might not be the case. Another lesson that I've learned is pulling back when people have invested in support from you is such a dick move. And here's the thing, it's nuanced, this conversation, it's complex, because we want to have boundaries, right? We want to create programs, containers that have space for growth, which means that, again, we want to have structures in place that support that growth. But when we have the kind of coaching business or healing business that is very much like a personal brand kind of business, where you are very much the face of the experience, you have a certain responsibility to show up in that space. And if you do have a team of coaches to support you and to support the growth of the business and the container or whatever, that's amazing. But be upfront about that, be honest about that, be clear about that. Don't create this illusion that you are going to be walking with people side by side when actually it's just your face on the banner and other people who do every element of the work. Be upfront, be honest. This comes back to that first lesson that I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion today. Transparency in your offers is an absolute non-negotiable. That doesn't just include the support people are getting or the content, it also includes who is delivering that support, who is creating that content. And there is nothing wrong with having a hybrid experience that involves multiple other experts and coaches, but be truthful. Be truthful about that. Another thing that I learned is you will lose friends when you live and breathe your values. And that is something that I've had to learn here, because what I was not about to do is lie about this experience that I had. What I was not about to do is pretend that everything was okay. And that meant letting some people leave my life. And the coach that ran this whole experience was actually a friend of mine before I invested in working with her. She'd been one of my clients in the past. We had a really good relationship, and that's done now, that's gone. There will be no reconciliation happening here. And I have to be okay with that. And it's hard, like losing friends, stepping away from people is hard. But sometimes that's what you've got to do. And I didn't just lose the friend who ran the experience, but I also lost some friends that I made during the experience. Friends who had noticed very similar issues as I had and had seen a lot of the harm being done and chose to continue supporting that coach in question. That is not something that I am going to accept in my circle of friends. It's just not. People get to make their own choices. People get to do whatever they want. No judgment to them. Like, if I have ever met somebody in my life, I wish them well. I really do. Even the ones that have hurt me. Like, I want the best for them. But that doesn't mean I want them in my life. Like, I do not want to surround myself by people who will accept things that are, to me, entirely unacceptable. And I don't care if that means that I'm left out of the group of cool kids. I don't care if it means that people bitch about me in WhatsApp groups. I don't care if that means that people screenshot things that I say and post them publicly. You do you. I am not going to be lying for you. And the last thing, and this is a biggie, healing from an experience like this, it's a journey. It is not going to happen overnight. I, like I said, signed up for this thing 2 years ago now, which means I finished this thing 1 year ago. And I am still untangling a lot of the hurt, a lot of the trauma, a lot of the residual angst that was created in that experience. I'm still working to get my mind back in gear. I'm still working to develop self-trust again and trusting my own decision-making skills, because for the longest time I blamed myself for getting myself into that situation. I blamed myself for not knowing better, for not seeing that this was not the right thing or this was not the right person. There were so many different thoughts and beliefs and destructive behaviors that were born in that experience. And I get that it's going to take me some time to get over it fully. And so if you can relate to this, if you have had any kind of harmful experience in the coaching world, then just remember the healing does not happen overnight. Even if you have like that moment of liberation that comes with finally being out of a particular space, chances are old echoes, old imprints will come up again in the future. And if they do, remember, this is not something you've done wrong. This is something that has happened to you, and that's something that you get to heal from. So I know that I've like rattled through quite a lot of things today, but I think you can tell I've had a lot bottled up inside. I've had a lot to talk about on this subject. And I hope that you found some value in hearing me speak about this today. It's hard to go through this stuff. It's hard to get over this stuff. And it's definitely hard to speak about it, especially in a public setting like this. But it felt necessary. It felt like time. It felt like I needed it. It felt like a lot of the people I'm surrounded by needed it. And it also feels like the industry needs it. The industry needs more people to speak more honestly about what good coaching is and isn't. So just know that I see you. You are not alone. You really are not alone. And please feel free to reach out to me at any time. If you want to share your story, if you just want to be seen, if you just want to be heard, my DMs are open to you. Now, I will also say that not all coaches are created equally. There are still some good eggs out there, but then I have to say that I'm a coach. Thank you for listening to Your Biz, Your Rules. I know that we all like to listen to podcasts, watch videos, read articles or books or posts on Facebook and not really do anything with that information. So I want to challenge you right now. I want to challenge you to take something from this episode, anything, and use it to spark action. Use it to activate some kind of change in the way you work and the way you live. Do yourself this service today and tell me all about it on Instagram. Hop over, shoot me a DM or share an Instagram story showcasing what action you are taking thanks to this episode. And of course, do all of the usual things. Subscribe, leave a review, let me know how much you love the show, and I will be back with you next week.